Hey, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. So we're here just to talk a little bit about what we do specifically for archives and libraries out there. Just a quick overview. We are Preservica, and we are working in digital preservation and have done so for over 20 years. So we were the first vendor in this space. And we have offices in Oxford and in the UK and in Boston. And we have at the moment, it says 300 on the slides, but we have almost 450 customers now worldwide. Some people use our system on premise, but most people now use a cloud implementation, a proper SaaS implementation, but it's the choice of the client really. And we obviously, because we deal with customers which have very sensitive information, we have a lot of certification in information security to ensure that we keep everybody's content absolutely safe. So obviously what we're focusing on, as you know, you're in digital preservation, so you will know that we focus very much on making sure the content is safe for the long term. So that means that we're looking after making sure that the files doesn't become obsolescent, and we have different migration strategies, etc., built in the software from the very start. We started really by working in the area of national archives. So we have been using Preservica in organizations like the UK National Archives now for over 20 years. We do look after both archives and libraries and other kind of organizations as well. But I think the key thing here is that to the difference really from other vendors in this space is that we specifically deals with people that also have not just open material but also have very sensitive material, and the security model is very comprehensive inside Preservica to ensure that only the right people can see the right material. And then you can, there's retention functions within the software that would then slowly open up material once it has been approved for a wider circle of access, or even public access, or for researchers or something similar. So I think that's sort of one of the really main differences in our software. But we do look after national libraries, and we mentioned, for instance, both the National Archives and the National Library of Australia use Preservica. The National Library has been a customer for over 8 years, but other libraries, that the Danish National Library, the New York Public Library, etc., all use Preservica. We also have a lot of big pan-national organizations that use Preservica both in their archives and in their library part. So we have 5 different United Nations organization, and including the head office in New York, they use Preservica. The European Commission, European Central Bank, etc., are all customers of Preservica. We touched upon the different kind of material. What we find that obviously working with people that have a lot of digitization. So a lot of our libraries have a lot of digitizations, and they have a lot of books and manuscripts and maps and newspapers, etc., that they put into Preservica. But more and more people put more and more digital born content. And if you think about the National Archives, they get content from different government departments. More and more of those are now fully electronic, and they have workflows that go straight into Preservica. Also, some of organizations, for instance, the Danish National Library, use all the ingest all their broadcasting. So all the TV and radio broadcasting are automatically ingested into Preservica. We also have people that look more for things to communication ways, so websites, social media, like Twitter, etc., can also be handled, emails, etc. So the type of a material that people use from a day to day in their businesses get looked after. And we do have now support for over 2,000 different file formats that we monitor and make sure that they are up to the latest sort of technologies, so that we can give people access to them. So you know, digital preservation, you know that you have a big repository, and in the repository you store your content, and you ingest material into this. And you can have different kind of workflows. So our big customers obviously have a more automated way of doing this. So if you are going to ingest, you know, many terabytes a day, if you have petabytes in your repository, you need to make sure that you have a nice flow of content coming in an automated way. Inside, obviously, we do what digital preservation system do. We do a lot of quality checks. We do the management. You can do appraisals. You can do dispositions if you have the right to do so. Maybe because you got content that you shouldn't be in the repository, or maybe that there is a reason for deletion, or just to open up, as I said before, closed content to the general public. And we do this with the compliance, and then obviously the active preservation. So the active digital preservation is where we monitor the file format and make sure that they get migrated to the latest and latest technologies. And the key thing here, obviously, in a digital preservation system, you have to do this with the right audit, the right provenance, to ensure that you can prove that nothing has been changed inside. The good thing with Preservica is whatever you can do outside, you can also do inside the system. So if you need to, or if you content, etc., you can do so inside. But anything that the system do, anything that a human does, is audited so that you can see exactly what's happened. And this is done at scale. So as I said, we have customers with many petabytes in their systems. And then we provide secure access, and you can use either use Preservica's access portal, or you can use your own access portal. And then typically big organizations like yourself probably will have your own portals that you'll be used, that we just connect via the APIs. So type of ingests, you can do manual ingest, but as I said, most of our bigger customers just have completely automated ingests you using the API. So we have very comprehensive APIs around the software to ensure that you can get large content in and do lots of changes, etc. Somebody's joining us. Welcome. We have special tools to manage emails, websites harvesting, social media, Twitter, and we can also, sometimes people do semi-automatic ingests. So for instance, if a government department have a lot of records in the records management system, you might want to run an export of those and then ingest those in a more semi-automatic way into the repository. We also have tools, embedded tools for ingesting from Microsoft 365 and from OpenText. And we also have functionality around remote contributors. So if you have people that you invite to contribute content to, but you want to review this content before it goes into the repository, we have tools to do so. I talked about access system. As I said, Preservica comes with an access portal, which could be used internally. It could be used by researchers, or it can be used to the general public if you don't already have a portal that you want to use. If you already have portal, we'll connect just using our APIs so that you can show off the open content in your system. Important part of Preservica is the APIs. We have a lot of comprehensive APIs so that what a human can do, it can also be automated. That include the ingest, as I said, bulk metadata editing, changing things, etc. And we have a lot of documentation around this area on our websites. And we also have a third-party library that have a lot of sample codes that people can use to help them to get started. Security, a lot of our customers have very, very highly secure information from that cannot be released and cannot be accessed in the short term. So for us, having the right processes in place in our business is very, very important. We have a lot of certifications and we get audited annually by 4 different independent organizations to do our Cyber Essential Plus, which is what we use in the UK, the SOC 2 certification in the US, ISO 27001, and obviously normal management ISO 9001. We use two-factor authentication. We have permission models, which James will probably talk more about, to show what you can do and what you can't do depending on what permissions you have inside the system. We have different type of storage policy, where you want to store the content, how many copies you want, etc. And we obviously do a lot of integrity checking all the time to make sure the content are not corrupt in any way. Another important part of what we do is also ensuring that we have a good exit strategy. So if people decided that they wanted to leave us, but they want to make sure that they still have all their content, all the metadata, and all the audit information in a structured way, you can just run an export workflow and get all your content out in the future. And it's important that as well that we protect the content for future changes, etc. You know, we might not be here in 100 years time, but hopefully your content will. So it's important that you can move it from different systems in the future. So the last thing I really wanted to say is about the user group. We have a very, very active user community. As I said, over 450 organizations use our product, and we have big user groups. In fact, we had a big user group here in Oxford only a couple of weeks ago, where we had hundreds of people coming to exchange ideas, discussions, talk to each other, learn from each other, etc. We have a community hub. We have special interest groups for special aspects of the product, and the customers really drives the roadmap forward to ensure that we provide the support that they need and the functions that they need for the future. And obviously, we as Preservica is part of the wider community, and our innovation team especially looks after new file formats, and they're part of the premise committee. They are part of a lot of the organizations to make sure that they can get the latest technology into our software, so we can support our customers the best possible way. Okay, I think I'm going to finish at this stage, and I'm going to hand it over to James to do the demonstration. Do you have any questions for me before I hand over to James? Nope.
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, James, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Anne. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to give you a kind of brief overview of the Preservica platform, and I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to look at the main administrative application for the archivist and collection manager, and then we're going to have a quick look at a discovery platform that comes out of the box with Preservica that you can use maybe internally within an organization to give a wider access to the collections. So first of all, I'm going to show the main administrative part of Preservica. So Preservica is a web application. We can deploy it in the cloud or potentially on premise, but either way you access it through a web browser. There's no software that needs to be installed at any point in the process. All your interactions are just through a web browser on your machine. So I'm going to log into the system now. You can set it up with two-factor authentication, and you can also connect Preservica to identity management systems like Active Directory or Azure AD, so you can have things like single sign-on, so it can be integrated into your kind of desktop. So I've just logged in. I've got a dashboard here that you can add reports to. Along the top are the kind of functional areas of the IAS model. So we have things like ingest, access capabilities, preservation functionality, metadata management, so control vocabularies, retention management, and we have admin options. What I'm going to do quickly is just jump into the repository explorer. So this is kind of a nice view of your holdings within the Preservica repository. So you can see down the left hand side we have some collections, and this is just one of my test systems here. So we've got collections down the left hand side. Preservica is designed around traditional archival principles, and there's a hierarchical model for holding your collections. So you can create top level collections, and then you can create record series, sub-series, think files, and then your digital assets within them. So for example, here I've got a collection from one of our customers provided this as a test example. It was a collection from the National Archive and National Library of Luxembourg. So you can see here we've got an archive collection. We can go into there and we can my internet stopped. Then we can go in and have a look at some child objects in there. So we have some fonts. Then we can open those up and we can go down inside and we can look at the child objects inside there. Internet is running slow, but we can go in and have a look at these objects in here. And then eventually you get down to a level you're interested in, and the assets will appear in Preservica. Am I still coming through? Because my internet seems to have stopped on this side. Am I still online?
Yes, I was a bit worried. This morning, my internet here around Oxford was completely out this morning. So luckily came on again in time for the presentation. So I'm hoping you're not having the same problem in your area.
I think it seems to have come back.
Okay.
I'll check. So here we've got the archival descriptions and levels of description, and then here at each level you can have your digital assets. So here we've got the assets. So you can use Preservica to mirror the archival levels of description that you would have normally in your organization, and you can have as many collections and as many levels of description as you want, and you can have as many layers of depth in your hierarchy as you need. At each level of description, you can add metadata about the level of description, and you can also add metadata about the objects itself. So here we've got some digitized manuscripts. I can look at the properties of that object. We have some standard fields like titles and description. Each object gets a unique identifier assigned by Preservica. So this is a UUID that uniquely identifies the object within the repository. You can also add in your own identifiers, and you can add in as many identifiers as you need. So things like ARCs or DOIs or persistent identifiers or ISBN numbers, for example, if they're books. And then you can link these back onto other third-party systems and archival management systems as well. So you have a link between Preservica and library systems. We also support links between records or objects within the system, so you can have links between different items in different collections, and you can have links going backwards and forwards and multiple different types of links to create alternative hierarchies. And you can also have as much descriptive metadata attached to records as you want. So here, this is an example. We've got some metadata connected to the Flemish government. We've got some standard Dublin core metadata, and Preservica is agnostic around metadata, descriptive metadata, so you can add as much metadata to a record as you want, and you can add different types of metadata. So there's no particular restrictions on what type of descriptions you can add to your objects. So that's kind of an example of the hierarchy. I've created a collection here called, okay, my internet seems to be back again now. I've created a collection here called the National Archives of Singapore, and I've put some objects in here. So I've just been on the website and kind of had a look at some items of interest. So here I've got government files, records. Inside government records, I've got papers presented to Parliament, and then I've got things like commands, statutory paper, different types of parliamentary proceedings. I can go in and see those different collections. I can open up a collection here and look at the object. And again, we can look at properties of these objects. So here we've got a title, I haven't got a description and no identifiers. What I can do is I can, with the right permissions, I can edit the descriptive information about an object. Preservica prevents change to the objects themselves. So once an object has been accessioned into the repository, you can't change that object. So I can't change the document or the photograph or the database or email. But you can, if you have the right permission, change information about the object. So for example, I can go into edit mode here. I can add a description to this object. I can save that. And as Anne mentioned earlier, everything that happens within the system is audited, and there's a full audit trail against everything you do. So I've updated the metadata, so I can go into the history of this record, and I can see on the 28th, which is today, this user, which is the user I've logged into, made a modification to a record, and I can even go in and see the value before I made the change and the value after I made the change. So everything that happens within the system is audited, and you can do reporting to find out exactly when changes were made, what the changes were, and who made them. Again, we talked about descriptive metadata. Preservica allows you to customize how metadata is used. As an admin user, you can go in and define metadata templates. So again, there's no built-in restrictions on metadata. So again, on my test system, I've got some metadata templates that I've added. But again, you're free to go in and add whatever metadata templates you want. So for example, here I've got things like METs and mods, some EAD templates, Dublin Core. So I could add a Dublin Core template into the system, and there it is. So you can customize Preservica with your own ways of storing and holding and viewing descriptive metadata, and you're free to add as many different templates for different collections or different types of records as you need. Also, Anne mentioned earlier, we have capabilities about setting and defining retention policies. So as an admin, you can go in and create different retention policies, and then as a user, I can choose either to have no policy attached to this record or one of the standard policies that a user has defined. So that's information kind of about the description of the object. I can also just go into the advanced tab and see how this object's held in Preservica. So here we have a kind of a hierarchy of the data model of how Preservica represents this information in the repository. So at the top level, I have the asset or the kind of intellectual entity. In this case, it's a report. And then Preservica is telling me that I have one representation or one version of this asset, and in this case it's the long-term preservation version, and what I have is a PDF version. So you can see here this is kind of technical metadata about the object, and there's information about, is it valid? In this case it's not a valid PDF 1.6. A lot of PDFs aren't valid against the PDF specification. And also we can have information about the actual bit stream itself. So we have information about the original file name as it came in, things like the file size, the fixed value. So these are the cryptographic hashes that are stored alongside each object in Preservica. And then whenever we access the information, access the record, download it, view it, we can validate these fixed values against the values in the database to basically prove at every point in the life cycle of the object that there's been no tampering with, or the storage has not changed that object. So you can guarantee that the objects you put into the repository are unchanged over their whole life the time in the Preservica platform. And then we also have a list of where this object is stored. So this is I'm using a demo system that's deployed in the cloud. So we have some cloud-based storage, but if it was on-premise, you'd be able to see the different storage devices where that object is stored, and you'd be able to see how many copies of that object you have in the system. And of course, you can always get the object back out at any point by just download. So I can download that object out of Preservica and open it up. The other thing I was going to say is that we do have quite sophisticated capabilities around rendering objects in the system as well. So all the objects in the system, you don't need to download them, even though that's possible. We can just view documents directly within the system. So at any point, you can just go in and view an object. You can view images, video, audio files, websites, emails, any type of object you might have. We can usually just render those objects directly within the platform, so you don't have to download them out of the system to view them locally. So that was a kind of example of a document. I've also got some photographs here. Again, these came from the National Archives website. Again, we can look at the properties. So in this case, I've got some title, description, but Preservica is actually, in this case, it's holding two versions of the image. So again, we have one record for the intellectual entity. It's got a title and a description. But Preservica is holding two versions. So we have the long-term preservation version, which in this case is a TIFF file. So here we have information about the TIFF file. How is it identified? Well, it was internal byte sequencers. Is it a valid TIFF? Yes. And then we have technical properties that's been extracted. And then this file's also gone through an access process where Preservica's generated an access version automatically. And now, in this case, the access version is the JPEG. So for kind of web dissemination or publication online, you can use the smaller JPEG that Preservica has created, and Preservica is storing both objects together as part of that same intellectual entity. And this kind of leads me on to the preservation capabilities in Preservica. So Preservica has standard rules, and you can accept those rules, and Preservica will use the rules to decide on the preservation policies within the system. So as material is ingested into Preservica, those preservation policies are executed, and if needed, new long-term preservation formats or new access versions can be created automatically. So preservation can take place without any interaction from users, and the process is completely seamless. Data can come in automatically. Preservica will check what type of objects it is. It will identify them. In this case, it's identified them as TIFF file. It validates them, and then it will take action based on the preservation rules encoded into the system. And we provide a set of default best practice rules, but users can go in and override and choose their preservation policies that fit their organization, so that you have the right type of objects associated with each intellectual entity in the system. So if you need to create new preservation versions, so for example, the TIFF file may be how you're accepting records, but your preservation policy might be that you want JPEG 2000 as your long-term preservation version. Preservica can do that, and you may also want a JPEG for day-to-day access, and Preservica can do that as well. So this is kind of behind the scenes, showing the kind of information that Preservica is generating automatically as information comes in. And now this object is available in two different formats. We have two options here. We can access and download the Preservica. It always gives you access to all the objects that make up that individual asset. So that's kind of example of some simple photographs. We also have really good capabilities around AV material. So Preservica has good capabilities around creating web-friendly access versions of lots of different types of video. We can store video and render it directly within the platform. So here, so this is on a cloud system, but it brings the information back instantly.
nestled at the heart of Beijing. This actually mirrors the cosmic.
So any audio files, oral history files, video, Preservica has strong capabilities around AV for preserving it, creating access copies, and making sure that it's accessible and we can render it directly within the platform. So that's the AV material. I've got some other options here, but one thing I was going to look at was something that's more of a born digital type of record rather than digitized records. So Preservica has capabilities around web archiving, and it has processes for web capture and web playback. So what we can do is we can archive and preserve public websites using Preservica, and that material can be stored inside Preservica as what's called a WARC file, which is a industry standard kind of data object for storing captured websites. And once that's held in Preservica, we can then render those and interact with that site. So here's a web capture of the National Archives of Singapore website, and it's just a single file within Preservica. And what I can do is browse and open that up. So what this is doing now is basically regenerating the website from the information stored in Preservica, and it's going to put it back together. So the idea is that you can do regular captures of public websites at different time periods as the information changes on that website, and then you can basically interact and find information. So this is taking all that information that's been captured and it's building it back as a website. So here you can see that this is now rendering inside Preservica. So this is only using information that's been preserved in the Preservica platform. It's not using any information outside of Preservica. So this is the website as it was when I rendered it fairly recently. So it probably hasn't changed much from this. But obviously websites do change frequently. So it's quite nice to have a history going back of all the changes to your website, all the information, all the public information, news and policies that's been published on that site. And I can interact with this in the same way that you can a normal website. So I can go about us, click on the history tab here, and you can see we've got information. If there's any documents stored on the website, you can download those in the same way that you can from the normal website. So here you can interact with it in the same way, and you can create these crawls as frequently as you need to create a full history of any changes to the website. So you can let people go back and see how the web presence was at a particular point in time. So there's the website as it was when I harvested it in Preservica. So Preservica has capabilities around born digital records like websites, emails, and of course we've had a look at some digitized material as well. You can, as I said, you can set up preservation policies so that as material comes into the system, preservation actions are taken automatically, and there's no involvement from users. In fact, for a lot of our large national archives and national libraries, Preservica kind of self-manages it itself. Data comes in automatically through various different processes. People might submit data through web interfaces, or they might have connections to other systems that bring data in. But actually, once the data comes in, all the actions in terms of identifying the file formats, validating them, checking against preservation policies and taking preservation actions happens automatically. So it's a system where you can do a lot with very little day-to-day interaction with the system. And we have some very large Preservica platforms with hundreds and hundreds of terabytes of data, and some up to petabytes, where people don't actually need to use Preservica very much. Everything just happens automatically. So it's a very kind of low impact into an organization. It doesn't need much staffing levels at all. So that was kind of some of the collections. I'll just one more item here. So this is an example of a multi-part object. So I've got a document here, and actually if I go behind the scenes again and just see how this is stored, I've got a description and title. But if I go to the advanced tab again, you can see that we have just the long-term preservation version, but actually this object is made up of multiple objects. In this case, it's multiple images. So we have different ways of storing information that always kind of makes it the most easy to access. So you can have an asset with one object in different versions, or you can have, in this case, it's one version with multiple objects. And now, because we've got multiple pages to a document, when we view that, we can kind of view it in a traditional kind of book viewer type setting. So here, if I go into full screen mode, I can then kind of turn the pages because this object is stored as individual pages rather than a single multi-page PDF, for example. So that's kind of the different capabilities around rendering those objects in Preservica. So for example, the example here would be that if you're scanning a book or a manuscript and you're doing scanning one page at a time, those individual objects can be stored together in Preservica, and Preservica will put them all back together when you come to view that asset. So that's kind of a quick view of kind of some of the content that I've got in here for this test example.
James, can I ask you to, I don't know if
Yep.
you were planning to, could you just show them the security model? Because I think that's quite an important part of when you are using things that could be quite confidential inside the system.
So the security model is based on a role-based access control list. So each object in Preservica, which might be a level of description or it might be an individual object. So if I go into this level here, and we have an individual document. So this is a document. What I can do is I can set what we call a security label or a security tag on this object, and again, it's very flexible. You can create your own security tags or labels. We provide a few out of the box to get people started, but then the people can design their own security model. So for example, here in this test system, I've got things like open, close, secure. So I could, for example, this is open. And then Preservica has a security module where you can decide which groups of users can interact with items that have been tagged open. So for example, this object has been tagged open. If I go into the security module now, I can choose open from the list here. And then this table is showing me at a glance all the interactions with open content by different role within the system. So for example, if I look at the manager user has full access to open material. They can edit metadata, they can view the metadata, and they can view the content. So we separate out permissions at a quite a granular level. So we have permissions for viewing metadata and viewing content, which means that you can allow people to view the metadata about record, but don't allow them to actually see the content of their records. So the record might be closed, but the description about the record may be open. So for example, if people do a search, you can get information back about the record, but you prevent people actually viewing the content themselves. So some organizations like that, because they want people to be able to know that the record exists without being able to view the contents, for example. So we separate out these different capabilities at a granular level. So viewing metadata and editing metadata as separate permissions, viewing the content as a permission. And we also have a capability around, does that user have the permission to kind of delete content out of the system as well? So you can give deletion permission to one or two users in the system, for example. And then if I look at the, if I go to closed, for example, here you can see that the manager has permission, but a lot of the other roles within this test system don't have permission to view any closed material. So you're free to choose what groups and roles you have in the system, and you can attach your Preservica users to different roles, which means that those roles then get assigned capabilities, and that means you can basically choose exactly which groups of users can do what type of actions on different types of records. So there's a lot of flexibility about controlling access down to the individual object. So you might have a collection with a few thousand documents, and one particular document you can close off and all the rest can be open. So there's a lot of scope for doing flexible access control. The other thing I was going to look at was the search capability. So we use a enterprise search tool behind the scenes in Preservica. So as material comes into the system, we index all the metadata associated with the objects, and we also do extraction of any text content from those documents as well. So for example, if there are Office formats, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, Word documents, we can extract all the text from those documents. If there are PDF documents that are images, but they have text layers in there, we can extract that text layer out of those documents as well. So for example, I'll just run a couple of searches just to kind of give you a feel for what Preservica can do. So I'm just going to run a search. I know that there's a PDF in the system here, and so we found that document based on a name in here, and again we can view that object. And there's the result. That was the search term that I used. I've got another example here. And again, this was a document that came off your website. So you can see here that I've searched for Shanghai Hotel, and it's told me exactly whereabouts within the document that term appears. And again, I can click on the search result, and it's brought it up here. And if I go to the top of the document, you can see it's here. So in this case, this is a digitized, it's a PDF, but it's a digitized PDF of a digitized document, but there's a text layer inside the document, and Preservica's found that, and we can do searches on top of that quite easily as well. We can also do filtering on search results. So you can add, you can narrow your search term down by different filters. So there's things like you can do kind of metadata searches on individual metadata attributes. So you can look for things like particular file formats. You can search inside the title, inside the full text, search for valid documents or invalid formats, by sizes. So there's lots of different options for actually filtering and narrowing down your search. You can also choose different search indexes, what we call. So here we've got things like if you're looking for emails, you can search on things like to, from, labels and within the emails, and you can customize how the search works by adding different search capabilities in for different types of documents. So that's the search capability. The other thing I was going to quickly look at is reporting. So one thing we can do is once we've done a search, you can always export all search results out to a CSV file. So if you need to get information out of Preservica as a spreadsheet, so if you want to list all the records that are videos that are over an hour long that contain certain metadata, you can do searches like that and get information back out. So if you need different types of kind of custom reporting from Preservica, you can do it that way. We also have some built-in business reports as well in Preservica, and these are standard reports that you can either run at any point, or you can set up a schedule to email you the completed report on a regular schedule, like maybe once a week, for example. And this is where you can actually do reports and query across things like the audit history. So you can find out what's changed in the system over the last week, or give me a record of all the give me a report of all the items in the system that unchanged over the last 2 weeks, for example. You can do that. So you can find out exactly what's been happening in the system and who's been changing things by running reports. Here I'm just going to run one report to show you. Here's a report of showing the breakdown of file formats within the repository. So this is my test system here. You can see this is showing all the objects within the system broken down by different file format. So you can see here we've got quite a few JPEGs. 10% of this system is email. Then we've got PDFs, some social media, 5% tweets, for example. And then we've got a table here just showing basically the frequency of objects here. So we've got WARC. So we looked at WARCs early on, which is the web archive. So archived fully interactive websites. And you can go down and look at some of the other objects. So we've got some quite old, maybe old file formats from the 90s or before, and number of objects. So things like WordStar files from Microsoft DOS. So some really old, obsolete files from maybe the late 80s, for example, and Preservica's maybe created some preservation, new versions in updated file formats based on these obsolete file formats. So Preservica has a good understanding of digital preservation and information needed to make decisions. We also have, I'm going to quickly just go into this now, but we have a what we call the technical registry. This is where we kind of hold representation information that Preservica uses. So this is a knowledge management system that holds information about file formats. So you can see here we have information about over 2,000 different file formats in the system. And as information comes into Preservica, it's checked against this knowledge base, and we can identify different types of files. So, for example, if I filter by PDF, Preservica knows about 40 different types of PDF object. And if I select one of those, we have information about how the file has been identified, and we have information about what type of attributes we want to measure as that information comes in. So basically, this system has been set up to say that we want to measure the title, the number of pages, the number of images, and we want to check if those PDFs are, in this case, encrypted. So Preservica can flag up any password protected files automatically within the system. So this is kind of the back end of Preservica now, and this is set up by our kind of digital preservation team. But again, people can have admin rights, can go in and customize information that's extracted from Preservica. So everything's very flexible and under the user's control about how information is identified and what technical metadata is extracted from objects within the system. So that is the kind of quick overview of the admin application. And I'm going to just quickly move on to the discovery system. But I mean, one thing I was going to say just quickly is Anne mentioned that there's no restrictions on once data is in Preservica on what you can do. And a good example of that is that Preservica is very flexible in terms of things like rearrangement, or we can create different classification and collection hierarchies. But once an object is in Preservica, it's very easy to move it between collections or record series. So you're not restricted on what you can do once data is in the Preservica platform. You have full flexibility to rearrange your collections and series, move information about. There's no restrictions on what you can do. So what I'm going to do now is move over from the admin application to our kind of built-in discovery platform. So this is I'll just open up my other web browser. So this is a non-expert interface that comes with Preservica. We don't expect everybody to use it, but a lot of our organizations do, because it's kind of out of the box, and it provides a simple read-only access portal into the data that Preservica has. So here, and one thing I'll say is it's easy to customize. So I've done a little bit of customization. So I've added some logos and banners, and I've put some text in here. And you can do things like exhibitions. So you can do things like what the current this week's item of interest, or what's popular this week into the system. So I can click items of interest, and you can go and have a look at those objects. So this is designed for showing the metadata around the objects and showing the actual digital objects themselves, but there's no capabilities around letting people change metadata or update metadata. This is a simple access portal for people to just view the objects. So again, we can go in and zoom in on this map. So for people who just want to access information, this is a really good tool. You can organize how the metadata is displayed. You can organize what type of metadata you want to show people. And you can again, you can customize kind of which groups of users are allowed to access it. So I've set it up so some information is accessed without being able to log in, but you can also have a login to give people access to records that aren't publicly accessible, for example. So we do have some organizations who put this system completely online, and some information is available to the public, and some organizations have it so it's completely private within their organization, and you need to log in to access that information. But if you want to share information within a wider organization and you don't want to give everybody full access to the Preservica admin application, this is a nice way to give people access to metadata and content through a simple web interface. So again, I can go into collections and we can just see the same collections that I had earlier. So things like maps, videos, websites, all the same capabilities around rendering objects are within this application. So everything we looked at earlier in terms of video capabilities, audio, we still have the same rendering framework. So that's the discovery portal, and again the same information about capabilities around search also apply. It goes back to the same search engine behind the scenes. So as long as you have permission to search those, to access those records, you can view them. So again, I've done a search, it's brought back the record, and we can view the record directly through the search interface because this record has been made open and we've allowed members of the public, in this case me, to view that record.
Okay, thank you, James. I think you finished there and we've gone through quite a lot. So I was now planning to stop the recording and then we can have a little bit of a discussions afterwards. So let me just stop this recording.